I'm UtahPolicy.com Managing Editor Bryan Schott. On today's podcast, we speak with Utah County Commissioner Tanner Ainge. He burst on the Utah political scene in 2017 when he jumped into the special election to replace Representative Jason Chaffetz. While he failed to win the Utah GOP primary in that election, he did win a seat on the Utah County Commission the following year. We'll discuss what he's been able to accomplish during his first months in office, how his experience as an entrepreneur translates to his current job, and whether he may have his eye on higher office sometime down the line. We'll also talk about the controversy surrounding whether Utah County should change their form of government and the county budgeting process, which is underway right now. Let us know what you think about this podcast by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. If you like what you hear, consider sharing with your friends on social media. Joining us today on the UtahPolicy.com podcast is Utah County Commissioner Tanner Ainge. I've been looking forward to this. I've been wanting to get you on the podcast for a while. Tanner, it's great to have you join us today.
It's great to be back on the podcast, Bryan.
Were you on before?
I was on once before, yeah.
Oh, that's right. When you were running for Congress, I had you on. Okay. See, I didn't go back through my notes. Well, you caught me there. Let's talk about. I
wasn't in this great studio, though.
You weren't in this great studio.
Kind of
no, we are.
Since then.
We are taping at the studio at the Underground, which is Spencer Stokes' wonderful facility that he built and let us use. Let's talk about you becoming a Utah County Commissioner. You sort of, I hesitate to use the phrase, came out of nowhere. Your name had been mentioned from time to time in Utah political circles, but when Representative Jason Chaffetz decided to retire in 2017, you ran for that seat, got on the ballot by gathering signatures. We're in that three-way primary with John Curtis and Chris Herod. Let's talk, and then you were able to parlay that into your position now as a Utah County Commissioner. You've been in office since January. What things can you point to that you've been able to accomplish since you took office?
Sure,
because I know you wanted to talk. As I was doing a lot of the research, you've talked about how you wanted to address the budgetary issues. You wanted to talk about ethics down in the county. It's not a gotcha question. You know, it's just sort of a check-in. What have you been able to get done in the scant 8 or 9 months that you've been in office? Because this is where the rubber hits the road, and the local governments is where things get done, and then less and less gets done as you move farther and farther up the chain.
Unfortunately, I agree with that.
Yeah.
No, but it's been an exciting time to be in Utah County. This year, really, I had 3 main categories of issues that I wanted to address in my first year. One was ethics and transparency, like we talked about. 2, solving our budget problems. 3, increasing or enhancing the effectiveness and efficiency of county government. So on the first front, you know, we in our last bond refinancing, a number of issues were flagged, which isn't going to be surprised because we had some negative headlines too. We didn't have an ethics policy in the county. We had some other practices that weren't the most transparent. So we've been working on this. Actually, on Tuesday, we'll be passing several policies that have been working in the background all year long. And one of them is a professional ethics policy that's going to create a lot more transparency for county government. As it relates to our budget process and solving the budget problems, this has been an issue that I've been all year long. I inherited a budget that was really set up for deficit spending this year, which means I've had to propose cuts, find opportunities for cuts, and I've done that constantly this year. And the first time to really address having a more balanced budget is this upcoming budget season that we're getting ready for.
I know you came from the business universe before you joined the commission and joined and came to your current position. How helpful has that been as you look to the budget, try to find efficiencies, which is a fun way to say cuts, find ways to cut back on the amount of money you're spending, find redundancies, places that you can cut. How effective has that been? Because a lot of people say, let's run government like a business. That's not always a one-to-one comparison. It's not apples to apples. So how has your experience in the business world translated over to running Utah County?
I think it's helped quite a bit, actually, because my entire career I've spent a lot of time looking at balance sheets and income statements. It's a familiar process for me, even though admittedly it's a different context when you're in government.
Yeah.
But still, you're looking at revenue items, you're looking at expense items. And one of the things we're trying to do this year to try to bring more of that business-oriented approach into the culture of our budgeting process in the county is budget for outcomes. So in the past, one thing that we do in government, sometimes we don't do in the business world, is assume that everything is static and budgets just roll over from year to year. And what we're trying to implement is this idea that if you're asking for additional funding, what are you going to accomplish with that funding? What's the outcome that you're seeking? And then measure them. Do they actually achieve those outcomes?
That's a sea change. I mean, when you talk about that, and I notice that a lot of governments have been trying to go from just spending the money to say, what are you going to accomplish and how are we going to be able to measure that accomplishment? You're meeting a lot of resistance from people who've been there because, government it's a place that doesn't, well, I don't want to say government, but bureaucracies are a place that are usually resistant to change. Like that, are you meeting a lot of resistance as you're changing over that process?
So I must say, this has been one of the most pleasant surprises about my experience so far with county government. Is we have a lot of incredible employees, and even though there has been some practices that we're trying to change because they've just continued year after year after year. When the question was asked, why are we doing it this way, and is there a better way? In many cases, the employees say, actually, no one's ever asked us, never asked for our input. We're willing to change. We want to do it this way. And so we've been able to roll things forward. And I think another critical factor to that is that we've had a lot of turnover of elected officials in Utah County this year. Yeah. We have a new clerk auditor, new county attorney. And so there's leadership at the top of these departments that are also really helping push this through. Amelia Powers, I can't say enough. She also came from the private sector, and now as clerk auditor who has a lot of budgetary responsibility, we've been working together to enhance this process, and it's been a great experience.
You also, you talked about the ethics, and that's another area where governments seem resistant to change, especially among elected officials who don't like to put curbs on what they are able to do. But it's a good move, and it's the kind of thing that I guess your constituents expect you to do, saying, you trust us with this position, and we want to make sure that we've earned that trust.
Absolutely. For me, this one was a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. Utah County has so much great happening. Our economy is thriving. Our population is thriving. We lead in a lot of great metrics, volunteerism and charitable giving. It's just such a great community, and yet we've had a few really negative headlines coming out of our county government. And so I just think that the members of our community are ready for that to stop. We don't want to tolerate that at all. And we don't have those issues right now in our county commission. And I think that all three of us on the county commission are saying, hey, let's enhance the standard. Let's make ethics a priority so that we never get into these types of situations that we've had in the past.
And I assume that's easier because you've got a lot of new leadership at the county. You had a lot of turnover in those positions where people who aren't entrenched, and this is the way we've always done it. You're like, well, this is a new idea, and let's try it this way.
Absolutely.
One of the things that has sort of taken the headlines is the dissolving of the Utah County Commission, putting that on the ballot. It was sort of derailed. So people understand where are we in that process, and I want to kind of delve a little bit deeper into that. But the way that I understand it, you were ready to put this question to the ballot, saying, should we dissolve the county commission and go to a mayor council system? And then that was blocked at the last second.
That's right. So earlier this year, actually my first week in office, within the first couple of weeks, a petition was filed to go to a mayor council form of government. And at that time, I kind of said, this is not, I want a little bit of time to evaluate this opportunity. That's one of the reasons I hadn't committed to a particular change or which form, is because I said, I'm about to be in this office and I'm going to learn the intricacies. And, because it's not also just going to a mayor council. It's also, do you want those council members to be at large, or how many at large versus geographic districts? There's a lot of nuance to it. And so one of the things we did is I said, let's create an independent committee to come in and study form of government and make a recommendation. So we kicked off that process, and that was full of some academic leaders, business leaders, other political leaders in the community came together, studied the issue for a couple of months, and ultimately made a recommendation. And what they did recommend was the mayor council form. And we can get into what details of that around it. And so that at that point, Commissioner Ivey and I were ready to vote to send that to the ballot.
And it takes 2 out of the 3 votes.
It takes 2 out of the 3 votes. And so we thought it would be on the ballot this year for Utah County residents to decide whether that's a change they wanted to make. And then a group of petitioners, which included Commissioner Bill Lee, filed a petition for a different type of form of government. And the nuance there of the law is that we cannot act as long as that petition is pending. So we were, as you said, essentially blocked from taking that action.
But from what I've read, it seems like you're confident that the original petition is going to get on the ballot at some point.
I do think it will happen. I think that the state legislature is seriously considering a path or a bill that would send this to the ballot. And if not, then I think that once this petition, whether it succeeds or it doesn't succeed, gathering its signatures, once there's a window, I think that we'll be prepared to place that same initiative back on the ballot.
This change makes sense to me as an outside observer. It's essentially, not exactly, but essentially the same thing that Salt Lake County did a number of years ago, where they went from the 3 county commissioners to a mayor council form of government, just because the government had gotten too big. It was just too big for 3 people to handle. They needed more people to handle the work and an executive in charge of that. But I'm interested because you, as someone who just came into this office, you essentially voted to eliminate your own office. That's a very rare thing to have happen. Walk me through that thought process of, you were just elected to this seat, and you obviously have political ambitions. You ran for Congress, you ran for the seat you wanted, and then within the first year, you're voting to let the citizens of the county say, well, we're going to change the form of government, and you might not have a job anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, to me, this goes back to ethics and transparency.
Yeah.
There's been a commentary that's existed in Utah County for quite a while that some people have pushed for change, and their perspective is that the only reason it hasn't happened is that the county commission wanted to keep their jobs. And so for me, this was a decision where that's one of the reasons why I formed the independent committee, is because I said, look, this affects each of our terms in office. It could affect our ability to run for reelection, salaries, and all of that type of stuff. So there's a conflict of interest. Let's let the committee decide, and I'll vote for whatever they decide. And I think that that's the fair and transparent thing to do on this. And because they recommended to cut my term short, I was willing to vote for that.
I'm intrigued because you just launched a thing called the Your County, Your Voice. It seems like you are really focused on trying to figure out what the county wants. You're rather than coming in with a set of ideas. I mean, you obviously everyone has a plan, otherwise you wouldn't run. You have to articulate why you're running for this office and what you want to accomplish. But it seems like you're also very flexible, or at least open to considering other issues. And that's why you're going with this Your County, Your Voice, where you're taking online submissions. You're doing a survey of people who live in the county to get their thoughts on certain issues. Tell me what you're hoping to accomplish with that and where you're hoping to take that whole program.
Yeah, I am really excited about launching this. This is one of the commitments that I had made, is that we would launch this type of program so that we would have better engagement and feedback from our county residents. So, I mean, a quick plug, go to utahcounty.gov, and on the homepage, you can participate in that survey, Your County, Your Voice. So for me, and by the way, it's not just this one survey.
Right.
What we're launching is this capability that we're going to have many surveys over time so that we have that ability to reach out to our citizens. One of the challenges in governing is, think about our 9:00 Tuesday morning county commission meetings. Most people are at work or at school during that time, taking care of family responsibilities. They're not in our meeting. So if they are in our meeting,
they're hardcore. They're hardcores. Right?
They're either hardcore activists or not even that. Even worse, it's someone who's directly affected or has a direct interest in something that's on our agenda.
Okay.
And so if you take that as an example, someone with a direct interest could plug our room with 100 people, pack our commission chambers, and as an elected official, if you make the mistake of believing that what's happening in those commission chambers is representative of the entire community, you could feel outnumbered and say, oh, wow, this people feel passionate about this in our community. We better vote for it. When in reality, if you had the pulse of the entire community, it might be that 100 people represents less than 1% of the population. And so I think that this survey just can have the effect of bringing the entire county into our commission chambers, and it's more representative.
Are you able to geofence it? Are you able to say it so it's only people in Utah County? I mean, what sort of safeguards are so the people aren't spam bombing it? Because I know I understand that it would be cost prohibitive to do a full on opinion poll, like we do with Y2 Analytics. Quick plug there. That would be way too expensive to do. So this is a cost effective way. It's using the government website. And it seems like a good use of that. But how are you doing some quality control so people aren't bombing it, trying to, skew it one way or another, or that people actually live there?
So the survey is powered by Qualtrics, obviously one of the greatest success stories in Utah County and in our state. And so they have very robust survey abilities. We're still learning all of the capabilities, which is why I say it's not just this survey we're announcing. There's a lot of different protections that you can place on it. Yeah. And so I think over time, we're going to get better and better at asking the right questions and how to limit and protect the survey. This first one, everyone can take it, share their opinion. But yes, the tool has some very robust capabilities.
I'm glad you mentioned Qualtrics, because I wanted to ask you about the tech sector, that tech corridor at that point of the mountain. I mean, that's going to be a big decision when they decide what they're finally going to do with that. And the pat answer is, well, we want to attack high tech. Well, get in line. Everybody wants to attract these high tech jobs. You're not only competing with other cities in the West, you're competing with other states. And Colorado is out there trying to offer incentives, and New Mexico and other places around the West are trying to get these high paying jobs to come in. How tough is the landscape to try to get these jobs? I know you're not probably as involved as EDC, Utah, or some of the other state groups are in trying to bring these things in, but you definitely have a part to play. And I'm wondering how competitive you're finding the field, because this is going to be a direct effect on your economy 10, 20 years down the line.
Absolutely. I think that the great thing is we have in Utah County 2 amazing universities that are pushing out a lot of great talent. There's some great companies. And what you see with a company like Qualtrics selling that the capital that then goes into other entrepreneurship and other innovation within the county, and some of the executives who go on and create new businesses, there's always this catalytic effect that I think is going to continue, and that doesn't require any investment or any incentive or recruiting from county or state government. That's just happening, and so really, that trend has continued on a very positive level. It's driving a ton of our high growth in Utah County. And in some cases, we're trying to diversify. Tyson Foods just came into Utah County, and they came in Eagle Mountain, way out west and in the northwest part of our county, where there's been a lot of residential development, but there hasn't been a lot of business. And so this is a great new opportunity for that part of our county.
And that brings up another topic, planning, long-range planning. I mean, the population along the Wasatch Front is going to double soon. I mean, that means we're going to have to deal with infrastructure. We're going to have to deal with housing. We're going to have to deal with high-density housing. We're going to have to deal with transportation. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's going to go into planning for this population boom. I know that lawmakers up on the Hill are freaked out on how to deal with this and try to get their colleagues to focus on the long-range plan. I bet you at ground level are kind of doubly freaked out about this, because, I mean, there are some really big decisions that have to be made, and soon, because this population boom is not going to stop.
Well, there's no question. That is, speaking of the survey, as I've already started to look at the preliminary results, obviously growth and sustainability is the number one issue that people are ranking that matters to them in Utah County. And when you look at the time that we spend as county commissioners, we probably spend a disproportionate of our time on that issue in one way or another. Transportation, right? I was just last night with all of the mayors of Utah County, where we meet together as a group for regional transportation planning, and constantly it is so hard to keep up with this population expansion, but we just need to continue to invest in our transportation and transit infrastructure to keep the wheels moving on this economy.
I want to shift a little bit to some long range things for you, and maybe some philosophical things for you as we wrap up our conversation here. You're a new county commissioner. You've been in politics, since 2017 as a candidate. Who do you count among your mentors? Who do you call for advice with some of these issues that you may not have had experience before? I know you have the other county commissioners and you have staffers, but who, when you're really troubled with an issue, who are you calling and saying, can you give me some ideas or somewhere to look on this? I'm just curious, especially as someone who is such a young politician in such an important role.
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, I have found that it's issue by issue.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to find the best people to reach out to. And typically you can't find, that one. I don't necessarily have one political mentor that I go to for all the challenges. But, recently I had a chance to really sit down with Congressman McAdams.
Oh, really?
And
okay.
He's been incredibly helpful. As someone who has served as the county mayor in Salt Lake County, another large urban county, he and I had similar professional backgrounds, and now serving in Congress, and he represents a sliver of Utah County, right? And he has been very helpful in providing some of the context that he experienced in Salt Lake County. Because one of the things that I do is, obviously, I look to my own county, I look to my fellow commissioners, look to department heads in the county and say, why are we doing it this way? What can we do better? There are consultants in the political realm, but sometimes you want to know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. What have the other counties done that we have never even thought about? And how have they, I'm sure they've experienced this problem, but they had a whole different, approach to it. And so reaching out to Salt Lake County has been helpful in that regard.
That's a very interesting answer. I mean, is there anyone, I guess I'm trying to think, who do you go to for political counsel? Because no matter what your decisions are, there's always a political element to it. I mean, you have to weigh the decision against, your reelection chances. I know that's a cynical way to do this, but I've been doing this for 20 years. Everybody has that in the back of their mind. Who do you go to when you're wrestling with a tough decision that has some political implications? Is there anyone that you like to talk to? I'm just trying to get a little sense of what your thought process is on that.
To be entirely honest on that, Bryan, I really don't.
Interesting. Okay.
I really don't. In fact, that's one of the things that I've tried to take on this approach to office is I don't care if I get reelected. I don't care about my political future in a way that affects my decisions. I just try to do the right thing. And one of the things I tried to do to build those muscles last year, after I had won the nomination, but before I was in office, there was a truth and taxation hearing that Utah County held. And there were hundreds of people in the room really frustrated that the county commission was considering a property tax increase. And yet I had studied that issue and knew that we were about to go into our third year of deficit spending. And deficit spending is not something I can support. It's something I'm incredibly frustrated at the federal level and at the local level in a booming economy like Utah County. It makes no sense to me. And so I was sitting there and watching this occur. And I just kind of had this thought that, you should support this. And then my political mind turned on and said, there's absolutely no reason to do this. You've got a group of people who are going to be incredibly angry with that answer.
Yeah.
You're not even in office, so there's not a decision to make. There's no reason to stick your neck out there. But at that time, I had done a lot of the analysis as a candidate, and I already knew that this was the right answer. And so I got up and I shared that opinion in front of that room, and I was the only one to speak in favor of what they were trying to do. And I did that in that moment because I kind of told myself, I want to develop these muscles of being able to do that and not caring about the political consequences. And that's something that I'm passionate about when I'm supporting other candidates. That's what I want to see, that characteristic in them.
Even though you say you don't care about your political future, you obviously have some ambition. This is the last thing I want to ask you about. You're seen as a rising star in the Utah Republican Party. You're young, you're charismatic, you've run for Congress, you're now a county commissioner. People have talked about you as possibly having your eye on a higher office someday. I'm not going to ask you to commit to any of that. But you are a Republican in the time of Trump. how do you square the two? Because I found that Republicans here in the state are different than a lot of the other Republicans around the country, where they do not like him personally, and they'll do the thing where, like, well, he did Supreme Court justices that we like, and we like some of his policies. The same thing that Mitt Romney did. How do you square those two, knowing that the legacy that Trump is going to leave is going to last beyond? I mean, the legacy every president leaves lasts beyond. You can't talk to Democratic candidates for president or whatever without bringing up Bill Clinton and what happened with him, and you can't talk about Barack Obama. And Republicans like to talk about Reagan, but we don't hear much about Reagan anymore. We hear now about Trump. So how do you, as a Republican, look as the path ahead, knowing that, right now it's the Republican Party of Trump? I know I didn't phrase that well, but I think you got the gist of what I was asking.
Yeah, I mean, this is a constant challenge. For me, there's a couple of things to look at. The issue, I'm close to being a single issue candidate on the federal, a single issue voter at the federal level. And that is debts, deficits, and entitlement reform. I just think that the data and the forecast of where we're going is so clear, and it's going to be a disaster.
It's terrifying.
If we don't do something.
Yeah.
And our party is supposed to be the party of fiscal conservatism. And I am not seeing the president do anything to address Social Security reform, Medicare reform, and debts and deficits are continuing to increase. And so on that basis, and many others that you're referencing, but that is one where I think that should squarely be, all Republicans should support those things that I just said.
Is there a way to get back to that as being the party of that? Being a party of fiscal conservatism? Because, you talk about conservatism, and there's not a lot of that in Washington, D.C. now. And it's not the Republicans. I'm not trying to blame the Republicans. It's both parties. I mean, you cannot run up a $22 trillion deficit without both parties being involved with that. You cannot run $1 trillion deficit each and every year without both parties being involved with that. So how do you get the Republican Party back to their moorings? Or has Trump blown up things to a point that our normal political institutions are going to be replaced by something, and we're not sure what yet?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't see the level of urgency that we need from a leader on those issues. And for me, that's disqualifying for any candidate, for president or for Congress. If they're not willing to make those tough decisions and speak with a level of urgency to solve our fiscal problems, they don't have my support. And that, to me, that doesn't seem like I should be a black sheep Republican because I feel that way.
Right.
Even though it happens to be the same feeling about a current popular president. The other thing is, I do think that Utah is very different. And I think that our party, Utah County is the youngest county in the nation. And sometimes we talk about the president has a very high approval rating within the Republican Party. But let's look more globally than that. What is happening to the party? Look at new registrations. Republicans are losing that battle. Young people are increasingly independent or Democrat. And so, to me, if you're going to look at the long-term health of the party, that's a very concerning trend that we need to reverse as well.
I'm sure we can talk about that another time. Tanner Ainge, thank you so much for your time. It was a great conversation.
Thanks for having me on, Bryan.